So what have we discussed here in this chapter? It's about how the narrator, trying to overcome his fear of water, he's taken a very bold step, that is of going to the swimming pool. And there, the swimming instructor has told him the various steps of becoming a swimmer, right? So he has learned how to swim. He's learned how to move his arms and legs. He's learned how to breathe, and he's swimming the length and breadth of the river, right? But what is it there still? That fear of water is still there. So whenever he was there in the middle of the pool and he would put his, like head under water, that fear would come back. And he wanted that fear to go away, right? So he did not want that fear interfering in his life again, because of the terrible experience that he had in the swimming pool. Already he did face a lot of problem, right? So he could not enjoy water related activities and swimming and canoeing like with his friends and family, because that fear of the water, that reminder of the misadventure that had happened to him, it kept on coming to his mind, right? So he wanted to shed that fear. And yes, this is a very important step. We should not live with that fear. It's very important that we have courage to overcome it. So we need to go through it bit by bit and overcome that fear, right? So let's see now what has the instructor taught him. He tied a rope around him, right? A belt, and for that belt there was this rope which passed through an overhead cable. And so the instructor would hold that rope, and yes, so here Douglas would swim across the length of the pool, along the length. And he has overcome his fear, but yeah, he has not become, you can say, absolutely fearless in water. Next, he held me at the side of the pool and had me kick with my legs. For weeks, I did just that. At first, my legs refused to work, but they gradually relaxed. And finally, I could command them. So yes, so his legs there, first of all, it was very difficult for him to move his legs, and he would hold the side of the pool and kick his legs. But gradually, he started taking control of the situation, and he started learning how to kick his legs. So thus, piece by piece, he built a swimmer. What are the pieces he talks about? How is a swimmer built? What are the pieces that the writer was able, had to put together to become a complete swimmer? Swimming, right? The movement of the arms, the movement of the legs, and the breathing techniques, right? When to inhale and when to exhale. Thus, piece by piece, he built a swimmer. And when he had perfected each piece, he put them together into an integrated whole. So he made that complete piece, that complete fearless person who is not afraid of the water, who's not afraid of swimming. But was he really complete? So he's done the mechanics of putting that person together, but really, is that person complete or not? In April, he said, now you can swim. Dive off and swim the length of the pool. Crawl, stroke. So he said, yeah, you can swim, dive off now and use this particular stroke, crawl it, stroke. Okay, I did. The instructor was finished. So the instructor finished his job, because now he's just taught him how to swim the length of the pool. But I was not finished. Why was he still not finished? Because he had not yet overcome his fear. I still wondered if I would be terror-stricken when I was alone in the pool. Why does that memory come to him? Because he had a terrible experience when he was thrown by the big boy in the water. So he was terror-stricken when he would be alone, and that fear would come back to his mind. I tried it. I swam the length up and down. Tiny vestiges of the old terror would return. Vestiges, remains. So there was still that fear. Where was that fear? Was the fear in his mind, or was the fear in the water? So that fear was in the mind. So yes, so as he was swimming, he would feel scared and was wondering that what would happen when I'm alone in the pool? Again, will my legs freeze? Will again feel numb and paralyzed? What would happen to me? Because the memories of that terrible day, they kept coming to him. Tiny vestiges of the old terror would return. But now I could frown and say to that terror, trying to scare me, huh? Well, here's to you. Look. And off I go for another length of the pool. But yeah, whenever that terror came, what would he do? He would be brave enough. And yes, he'd say that, no, I'm not scared. And he would swim the length of the pool, which was a very good thing. Like, of course, in the pool, he's not going to be terrified, as we had discussed earlier, because of the very controlled conditions over there in the pool, right? So we know the length, we know the depth there. And once you are an expert swimmer and you are comfortable with the swimming pool, that you will be, like, of course, not afraid of that. But what is there still at the back of the mind of the writer? That fear which he experienced when he was thrown into the water. He did not want that fear to come back again ever. This went on until July, but I was still not satisfied. I was not sure that all the terror had left. So he's swimming the length and the breadth of the pool. He's learned all the strokes, he's learned all the techniques, but still he was not satisfied, right? Swimming in the pool, he wanted to try a little more. So I went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire, dived off a dock at Triggs Island, and swam 2 miles across the lake to Stamp Act Island. Okay, so what are the places that he went to? What are the places that he's gone to overcome his fear? So all these, he's come out of the pool and he's gone to the lakes, right? So he's gone to all these places there, which he has mentioned. And why has he done that? So that he can swim in the lake, which is quite different from swimming in the pool. And he wanted to make sure that he has overcome that fear. That fear would not come back haunting him again, right? So which is the right thing to do, which is the brave thing to do. Dived off a dock at Triggs Island, swam 2 miles across the lake to Stamp Act Island. I swam the crawl, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke. So he's tried all the strokes here, and of course he's quite confident. It's quite like relaxed over there. Only once did the terror return. When I was in the middle of the lake, I put my face under and saw nothing but bottomless water. What a brave thing to do. He was in the middle of the lake and has put his face under water. And yes, the lake, he saw nothing but bottomless water. The old sensation returned in miniature. So it was not a blown up, like a face of that terror which he experienced many years ago when he was a young kid. But yes, it did come in a very small form, in a miniature, small form. I laughed and said, well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me? It fled and I swam on. So yes, Mr. Terror is saying, yeah, you've come here to scare me. What do you think you're going to do? And he scared the terror away and he swam on. So in the middle of the lake, imagine you're in the middle of the lake, you put your head down and yeah, you're looking at the bottomless water. And yeah, it is quite scary, but he has overcome his fear. So absolutely good thing for him. Yet I had residual doubts. At my first opportunity, I hurried west, went up to the Teton to Conrad Meadows, up the Conrad Creek Trail to Mead Glacier, and camped in the high meadow by the side of Warm Lake. So Warm Lake here, Lake Wentworth, all these places he's going, to more difficult places. Why? Because he wanted to see that if even in the most scariest circumstances, and even in the most treacherous situations, will that fear return or not? The next morning, I stripped, dived into the lake, and swam across to the other shore and back, just as Duke Hopron used to do. So he's just swam across the lake, and yeah, so he does not want to, that any vestiges, whether it is in miniature or whether it's a tiny form, that fear should never come back again. Right? So in the middle of the lake, he had a little bit of fear. So he wanted to remove whatever remains of fear were there in his mind. Right? I shouted with joy, and Gilbert Peak returned the echo. So he was there up to Mead Glacier. He went to the warm lake, and that is where he was swimming. He shouted with joy, and there was this echo of his happiness. I had conquered my fear of water. The experience had a deep meaning for me, as only those who have known stark terror and conquered it can appreciate. In death, there is peace. There is terror only in the fear of death, as Roosevelt knew when he said, all we have to fear is fear itself. Because I had experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear of it can produce, the will to live somehow grew in intensity. At last, I felt released, free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside fear. So beautiful last paragraph. We're just going to discuss this, right? So this experience, which experience is he talking about? Of overcoming his fears. He's gone to various water bodies. He's swum in the pool, in the lake. He's gone to even higher, you can say, reaches there by the glacier and the warm lake there. He's gone and swam over there. And he's saying, why was this experience? Because people who have experienced fear, who have experienced that fear that in a moment I'm going to die, I might drown, and it's all over. So he's saying only they can appreciate this true meaning of fear. And that is why he was so adamant that I have to overcome this fear. I don't want any remains of it to be there in my mind. In death, there is peace. Because in death, nobody knows about it, right? There's peace. There's no fear of anything. It's only as long as we are alive, we have our fears, we have our worries, we have our tensions. Right? See, we are alive here. We are worried about our health. We are worried about our near and dear ones. That's why we're all locked up at home, isn't it? So as long as we are alive, we are going to have our fears. We are going to have our worries. We are going to have all these problems. But in death, there's nothing. There is terror only in the fear of death, as Roosevelt knew when he said. So yeah, you've had an experience where you're really experiencing death, you know, you like almost dead. You realize the importance of life. You value life because you were about to lose it. You were about to, you know, like have that very fatal, tragic experience. As Roosevelt knew when he said, all we have to fear is fear itself. So we have to overcome these fears. Fears that do not allow us to live properly. So the fears which are created in our minds, fears that we have created ourselves, all those fears we need to overcome so that we are able to live our life in a proper way. Because I had experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear of it can produce. That terror that, okay, I'm going to die. Right? So he said, I had experienced that. So I was almost dead and I knew what it felt like that. Yeah, in a moment, I won't be able to breathe again. So somehow he said that desire in me, that will to live somehow grew in intensity. At last I felt released. Released from what? From the fears. So free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside fear. So yeah, so of course he's free to walk all the paths anywhere he can go because he has conquered his fear. He's shown that such a brave person he is, right? And that fear, it is just a state of mind. And as long as we are alive, we are definitely going to have our fears. And who is the person who appreciates life more? Who's the person who's going to value his life more? The person who has had a near death experience, right? So the person, yes, who was afraid of swimming or who did not know how to swim, was about to drown, and how that person is going to make efforts to overcome that fear. Right? So this is a very, very important lesson. It is not just an autobiographical account. It is not just an autobiographical experience of the writer, but he is giving us a very important message that we cannot live our life properly if we do not overcome our fears. Right? And where does that fear exist? That fear exists in our mind. So we have that strength in us. We have that courage in us to put away those fears, to overcome those fears. right? So he's there, he made all efforts, and we wonder now, like, how is it going to affect him, right? So you like, fine, there's so many people who don't know how to swim, so why did he bother? But he was afraid of that fear that was coming to haunt him again and again, a reminder of that incident, that he would have lost his life. He did not want that to happen again. And that fear when he was alone in water, that fear coming to his mind, yeah, that might drown, right? He might, like, of course, it won't be able to survive that experience. So that is why he was very, very adamant, and he was very determined that, yes, I have to overcome this fear, which is exactly, actually a very brave thing to do, a very good thing to do. Yeah. So, okay, so with this, we have come to an end of the chapter. Now, when Douglas, writes about his experience, that how he went underwater, all the plans that he had in his mind, he had just one single-minded plan, that was, as he would reach the bottom of the pool, what is he going to do? He's going to use all his force and try to come to the surface. Okay. And so why has he given such vivid details? Anybody? Why has he given such vivid details? How does he remember it so clearly? After so many years, when he would have started to write his memoirs, his experiences, so he wrote it so clearly because it was something that had a great impact on his life, something that created such a fear in his life. So he could never forget that experience and that misadventure that he had. Right? So he has given a very vivid experience, and we can feel him that gasping for breath. We are there, as he goes again underwater. We are, like, of course, holding our breaths. Will he come to the surface? Is he going to survive? What is going to happen to him? As he says that his lungs were about to explode, his legs were paralyzed with fear, his brain was not thinking, and he could only just hear the beat of his heart telling him that, yes, he is alive. Right? So yes, it is there to tell that he had this experience with death, a near death experience. And that is why when he survived that misadventure, when he survived that experience, he wanted to overcome that fear. Although it did take him a long time to gather that courage, but eventually he did. And yes, he wanted to overcome that fear because he did not want such an incident to happen again. Secondly, he had seen death at such close quarters that he valued the life. And that is, I think, so one of the most important lessons which has been taught in this chapter.